Have you ever wondered if there are places on Earth that feel like they were written wrong into reality, where the landscapes go far beyond anything the human imagination can grasp? There are lands where people cling to sheer cliffs, cross endless voids, or face the raw forces of fire, ice, and wind, as if nature itself is testing the very limits of survival. In these places, beauty is not gentle, but overwhelmingly intense, to the point of fear, where every scene makes you question whether this is reality or some parallel world that exists alongside it. Every step is a challenge, every frame a paradox, and even standing still, you can feel the awe creeping into every breath you take. These are not just destinations, but the boundary between the real and the unreal, where you will witness the most surreal wonders nature has ever created. On the harsh, high mountains of China, Zhejiang Monastery clings to a nearly vertical cliff where grey, barren rock makes the entire complex look like a base from another planet. Zhejiang Monastery stands at an elevation of about 12,000 feet, where thin air forces many explorers to stop often just to control their breathing. The place makes visitors wonder why ancient builders chose to construct a monastery on such a steep cliff where every stone and beam had to be pulled up by ropes, likely because the extreme terrain created deep silence for meditation and protected the monastery from wars for centuries. Wooden corridors of Zhejiang Monastery extend outward above a cliff, dropping thousands of feet, making each step feel like walking in open air. Some wall paintings inside the monastery have survived for more than 400 years, showing how human craftsmanship endured in a severe environment. From a distance, Zhejiang Monastery looks like a city of monks suspended on a massive wall of stone where human life exists on the final edge between rock sky and survival. How did Emerald Lake appear in western China, where a dry landscape suddenly holds emerald green salt ponds scattered like giant gemstones across the ground? Walking along narrow white salt ridges, visitors see ponds with different shades of green that resemble a natural color palette placed across a barren surface. The entire Salt Lake system covers about 15 square miles, large enough to form a network of shallow ponds arranged like geometric patterns. Most ponds are only about 3 to 7 feet deep, allowing sunlight to reach the bottom and reveal the intense green color of mineral-rich water. Geological studies show the water holds very high levels of magnesium and potassium salts, making its salinity several times stronger than ordinary seawater. In this dense mineral water, only a few salt-tolerant microorganisms can survive, creating a rare ecosystem inside an inland Salt Lake environment. How does Henningsvær in Norway exist as a fishing village set in the Northern Sea, where wooden houses stand on rocky islands surrounded by open water? Walking across small bridges between the islands, visitors see fishing boats tied beside houses while the ocean stretches around the entire community. The settlement has about 500 residents, yet many generations have continued fishing traditions and built their daily life around the sea. From a distance, rows of red and yellow wooden houses follow the harbor, while steep mountains rise behind the village. A football field sits on a rocky island beside the ocean, measuring roughly 100 yards, appearing like a green platform placed within the sea. Standing on the harbor and looking across the surrounding water and mountains, the village begins to feel like a small cluster of homes floating in the ocean. Imagine in the desert of Peru, there is Huacachina, a small oasis hidden inside a vast sea of sand that makes the landscape look like a strange, distant planet. Green Lagoon sits inside a deep bowl of sand where people hold on to life in the middle of an endless ocean of dunes. The giant dunes around Huacachina can rise nearly 1,000 feet high, forming steep walls of sand that make climbing them feel like a real expedition. Geologists have spent many hours climbing soft dune slopes to study how these dunes slowly move and bury every trace left by people. The place also attracts explorers, where off-road drivers race down steep sand slopes where one small mistake can flip a vehicle into deep sand. In the middle of this vast world of sand, Huacachina survives as a fragile point of life where humans test the limits of survival. Danakil Desert in Ethiopia spreads across a vast salt basin in East Africa, where the surface of Earth is slowly pulling apart along an active tectonic rift. Large parts of the desert lie about 400 feet below sea level, making it one of the lowest land areas on the African continent. The desert sits at the meeting point of three tectonic plates, where the crust is constantly stretching and creating intense geological activity. Huge salt plains extend for hundreds of square miles after ancient lakes evaporated and left thick mineral layers across the desert floor. Geological studies show the region was once covered by ancient seawater that later evaporated and formed massive salt deposits across the landscape. For centuries, solid salt blocks cut from the desert were used as trade currency and transported for dozens of miles across the harsh terrain. In the desert region of Xinjiang, China, Daryaboyi exists as a small settlement surrounded by an area of more than 127,000 square miles, a size larger than Germany. You stand among low houses and long walls of sand stretching toward the horizon, feeling how small this community is within a space covering more than 127,000 square miles, and understanding that each deep well marks the line between survival and disappearance. To reach this place, travelers once spent several days crossing open sand by camel, which shows how isolated the settlement was before modern roads improved access. Clusters of poplar trees grow from deep underground water, forming rare green patches that support life for the entire community in a dry desert environment. Many families have lived here for generations, without leaving, maintaining small farming and animal herding within a landscape that remains largely separated from major urban centers. Sand dunes rising dozens of feet continue to shift slowly over time, forcing residents to strengthen their homes and regularly adjust living spaces so they are not buried by moving sand. At Lencois Maranhenses National Park in Brazil, what makes this vast white sand landscape look like the surface of a water planet, floating in an endless ocean of sand? The park covers about 600 square miles of white dunes, an area almost the size of a large city where travelers can easily lose their sense of direction. During the rainy season, rainwater becomes trapped between the dunes and forms thousands of clear blue lagoons, leading scientists to describe this place as a living geology laboratory. Several exploration teams recorded journeys across dunes, rising nearly 130 feet high, about the height of a building with more than 10 floors, before reaching the hidden lagoons. Scientific studies discovered that some fish survive here by leaving eggs buried in dry sand, waiting for water to return in the next cycle. Seen from the sky, thousands of blue lagoons scattered across white dunes make Lencois Maranhenses look like a map of a distant alien planet. How can a place like Isha Cliff Restaurant in Switzerland cling directly to a rock wall in the Alps, where visitors step onto a balcony facing only mountains and sky? The building stands around 4,700 feet above sea level, so every meal happens high on a mountainside near the level of drifting clouds. Sitting at wooden tables beside the cliff edge, visitors observe massive limestone layers stacked across the rock like giant pages from a geological record. Who first imagined building a dining place on such a steep mountainside, and how were wooden structures secured onto the nearly vertical rock face? The structure dates back to the late 19th century, when it served as a simple mountain inn for climbers traveling across difficult alpine terrain. Standing on the wooden balcony pressed against the cliff, many people feel as if their meal is suspended within the vast alpine mountains. Come to Meteora in central Greece, where giant sandstone rock pillars rise straight from the valley and create steep landscapes that make the place look like another planet. Why does Meteora make many people feel as if they are stepping into another world when monasteries still stand on rock pillars nearly 1,000 feet high, perhaps because the vertical terrain forces people to live completely separated from the ground? When the first monks arrived here, they accepted living on top of steep rock towers where every path of access was dangerous and the distance to the ground below was extremely far. For many centuries, the only way to move up and down was by rope ladders and hanging nets, so every journey became a life or death moment above vertical rock walls. In this place, the monks once believed that only angels could help humans reach the tops of these rocks because the terrain was too dangerous for normal climbing. The combination of extreme vertical rock formations and monasteries hanging on their summits makes Meteora one of the most surreal landscapes on Earth. In the Namib Desert of Namibia lies Dedvlei, a white clay pan where trees dead for more than 600 years still stand upright on cracked ground. Around 600 to 900 years ago, the river that once supported large trees was blocked by shifting sand, leaving the entire area dry and the trunks frozen in place. Extreme dryness prevents the wood from decaying and naturally preserves it, so tree shapes from the 15th century remain intact as biological evidence of environmental change. The surrounding dunes rise over 1,000 feet high, similar to a building close to 100 stories tall, forming a massive sand barrier that isolates the basin from new water sources. Local people share stories that this land once carried flowing water strong enough to sustain tall trees before a natural shift reshaped the landscape for centuries. A place that once held life now contains only dry trunks and white clay for hundreds of years. So what force erased an ecosystem so completely, if not the slow but decisive movement of sand over a long time? Trift Bridge in Switzerland appears as a slender suspension bridge stretched across open space between steep mountain walls, with a glacial lake formed after retreating ice far below. As you step onto the narrow walkway, pale blue water lies deep beneath, while large rock walls surround the valley, creating the feeling of standing above the landscape. The bridge extends about 560 feet, nearly equal to 2 football fields, making the crossing across the mountain gap noticeably long. Strong steel cables hold the entire structure between rocky cliffs, allowing the suspended bridge to remain stable while hikers continue moving across it. The walkway measures around 3 feet wide, so visitors move in a single line while the wide open space spreads clearly beneath their steps. Standing near the middle of the bridge and looking toward the surrounding mountains and glacial lake makes the crossing feel like a path suspended within a high alpine landscape. High in the mountains of Nepal, Tilicho Lake appears as a massive body of water located about 16,000 feet above sea level and stretching nearly 2 miles in length. The lake reaches a depth of about 200 feet and its water mainly comes from melting snow and ice flowing down the surrounding mountain slopes. Around the lake stand steep rocky mountains rising thousands of feet, where the landscape remains largely bare, with only limited vegetation across the ground. Because the lake sits close to 16,000 feet above sea level, the air pressure here is much lower than in lowland regions, and the human body must adapt gradually. Within a vast rocky basin in the high mountains lies a broad sheet of water extending almost 2 miles, creating an unusual geographical formation at extreme elevation. A lake nearly 2 miles long and about 200 feet deep continues to exist within this high mountain environment surrounded by cliffs rising thousands of feet. Korowai is an indigenous community living in the tropical rainforest of Indonesia, where houses are built on large trees as part of a long-standing survival system. Some houses rise about 100 feet high, equal to a building of more than 10 floors, and the entire structure is made only from wood, leaves, and forest vines without metal or concrete. Building one such house requires several days of collective labor, from selecting a strong support tree to weaving the floor, proving their architecture comes from inherited knowledge rather than chance. Dense rainforest surrounds their living space, and the wet and thick ground forces people to organize daily life vertically instead of spreading across flat land. Korowai were recorded as one of the last communities to maintain a hunting and gathering lifestyle until the late 20th century, a fact that surprised many researchers. The continued existence of a society living dozens of feet above the forest floor for generations reflects strong adaptation and tight community bonds, where each house serves as both shelter and a survival fortress. In Norway, Saltstraumen is a narrow strait famous for producing the strongest tidal current in the world, where the sea does not simply flow, but twists into massive whirlpools again and again. About every 6 hours, more than 14 billion cubic feet of water are forced through a channel less than 2 miles long, equal to over 160,000 Olympic swimming pools squeezed into a tight gap. The current can reach nearly 25 miles per hour, strong enough to require local fishermen to calculate exact tidal timing or risk being pushed off course. Whirlpools up to about 30 feet wide form and disappear repeatedly, turning the sea surface into a constantly shifting system powered by tidal energy alone. Amid the roaring water and spinning surface, you clearly feel enormous pressure compressed through a narrow passage and understand that differences in sea level between two bodies of water drive this powerful acceleration. Saltstraumen is not only a natural phenomenon, but also a symbol of ocean strength, where people have learned to adapt to tidal cycles instead of attempting to control them. What kind of place is Vardzia in Georgia, where an entire ancient settlement was carved directly into a mountain cliff, leaving many visitors wondering who created such a structure and how it was achieved centuries ago? Walking through narrow corridors inside the rock, travelers move across chambers and stairways connected within the mountain, creating the feeling of exploring a maze cut from solid stone. How could ancient residents move through these hidden rock passages and live inside stone chambers when every wall and ceiling had been cut directly from natural rock? The complex once included about 600 rooms carved into the cliff, forming a network of living areas, storage spaces, and religious chambers inside the mountain. Why did people during the medieval period carve homes deep into a cliff instead of building on open ground? And how were these rock corridors connected into a functional settlement? An earthquake during the 13th century exposed many inner caves that were once hidden inside the mountain, revealing the rock city like a massive cross-section across the cliff. Monzel sea forts off the coast of the United Kingdom are military sea forts built on steel towers placed in open water during the Second World War, completely separated from the mainland. The structures rise more than 65 feet, about the height of a 6-story building, standing on metal columns driven deep into the seabed to hold guns and living quarters for soldiers. They were constructed in the early 1940s to defend against bomber aircraft and naval mines, and dozens of soldiers once lived and worked there for months in isolation. After the war, some towers were abandoned, and in the 1960s, several were used as offshore radio stations that attracted thousands of listeners. There are no trees and no natural ground, only rusted steel and narrow bridges linking the towers, giving the site a stark and isolated appearance. Why can a steel structure placed in open sea survive for decades without resting on land? The answer lies in metal support legs fixed deep into the seabed, spreading pressure and keeping the whole system stable over time. In northern Iceland, Veria is a barren geothermal field where cracked ground, boiling mud pools, and sulfur gas rise constantly from active layers beneath the surface. Some mud pits stretch about 10 feet wide, large enough for a small car, as groundwater mixes with minerals and gas from magma only a few miles below. There are no thick plants or nesting birds, only yellow, orange, and grey mineral soil covering the land, giving the sense of standing on an unfinished part of Earth. Since the 19th century, scientists have studied this area as a natural laboratory, while Iceland uses geothermal energy to heat more than 90% of homes nationwide. Walking along narrow wooden paths over fractured soil, you feel steam bursts and slow mud bubbles breaking like the pulse of a restless planet. Why does a place made of mineral earth and sulfur gas attract thousands each year? Its mix of natural danger, scientific value, and visible underground energy makes it clear proof of powerful geological forces still at work. High on the Montserrat mountain range in Spain, Montserrat Monastery appears as a large religious complex attached directly to steep rock slopes about 2,400 feet above sea level. The surrounding mountains formed from sedimentary deposits about 50 million years ago, producing a rare conglomerate rock structure studied by geologists. Over millions of years, erosion carved hundreds of stone columns rising roughly 600 to 1,000 feet, creating an unusual skyline across the mountain ridge. The monastery was founded around the 10th century and has remained active for more than 1,000 years as a Benedictine religious center. Many buildings follow natural rock terraces and include a basilica, public square, and living quarters, supporting monks and thousands of visiting pilgrims. The monastery library now preserves more than 300,000 books and historical manuscripts collected over many centuries of religious scholarship. On the island of Sicily in Italy, Gol dell'Alcantara appears as a volcanic canyon where flowing water cuts directly through tall walls of solid basalt rock. The canyon stretches about 3,000 feet, while volcanic rock walls nearly 80 feet high create a narrow stone corridor between massive basalt formations. These rock walls formed about 8,000 years ago when molten lava cooled rapidly and cracked into natural polygon-shaped basalt columns. In several sections, the distance between the two rock walls is only about 15 feet, which makes the entire canyon feel like a giant natural stone passage. Many basalt columns inside the gorge reach about 70 to 80 feet high and show hexagon or pentagon shapes created during lava cooling and contraction. In a few places, the basalt columns spread outward in fan-shaped patterns, which is a rare geological structure clearly visible in this canyon. Why does Castellfollit de la Roca in Spain stand on the edge of a volcanic cliff where the entire village seems attached to a narrow basalt ridge? Walking along the stone streets, visitors notice many houses built very close to the cliff edge, where the back walls nearly meet the vertical rock face. The cliff supporting the settlement rises about 160 feet, which is roughly the height of a building around 15 stories tall. How did this rock ridge appear when geological studies show lava erupted here about 200,000 years ago and cooled into strong basalt columns? Looking at the cliff surface, you can see several stacked lava layers, where each layer represents a different stage of ancient volcanic activity. Along the cliff edge, many historic houses were built from local basalt stone, which makes the village blend naturally with the volcanic rock foundation. In the waters of Peru, Uros floating islands exist as a group of man-made floating islands where the ground beneath your feet is not soil but thick layers of woven reeds. The islands can be about 6 feet thick, close to the height of an adult person, strong enough to support houses and several families on what is entirely plant material. In the past, when conflict appeared, residents could cut the anchor ropes and move the whole island away, turning the water surface into a rare form of mobile defense. A community living more than 12,000 feet above sea level on floating plant platforms for centuries raises a question: where else is the boundary between land and water erased so completely? Every few weeks, people must add new layers of reeds because the lower parts slowly decay, and without maintenance for just a few months, the structure can weaken noticeably. Children grow up on the soft reed surface, learning to row boats and replace materials from an early age, their daily life directly tied to the constant renewal of their artificial ground. Cappadocia is a strange natural landscape located in the center of Turkey, famous for volcanic rock terrain eroded into thousands of stone pillars and valleys that look almost unreal. Cappadocia spreads across nearly 1,900 square miles, and the entire region looks like a vast ocean of stone, where countless sharp rock towers rise densely like an alien forest of pillars. Many of these rock columns stand as tall as a building, with more than 10 floors, balancing on soft volcanic ground like giant stone chimneys rising from the earth. The soft volcanic rock allowed ancient people to carve deep rooms, corridors, and storage spaces inside the stone in order to survive in this harsh environment. Geologists from NASA have studied Cappadocia as a natural model to understand the surface of Mars because the rock valleys here resemble the landscape of another world. Walking through these enormous stone labyrinths, many explorers say people suddenly realize how small humans are compared with the slow but unstoppable power of nature. In Yemen, Shibam developed as a vertical city with more than 500 mud brick towers, rising about 100 feet within a dry desert setting. Buildings between 5 and 11 stories stand closely together in a compact zone, forming a natural defensive system instead of traditional city walls. After major floods in the 16th century, residents rebuilt the settlement upward rather than outward, marking a clear shift in urban planning strategy. Many families share a single tower for generations, using lower levels for storage and upper floors for daily living and rest. In 1982, the city received recognition as a World Heritage Site, confirming its rare architectural and organizational value. Shibam proves that a skyscraper model existed more than 400 years ago, using earth as the main material, raising the question of whether durable architecture truly depends on modern steel and concrete. Cappadocia is a strange natural landscape located in the center of Turkey, famous for volcanic rock terrain eroded into thousands of stone pillars and valleys that look almost unreal. Cappadocia spreads across nearly 1,900 square miles, and the entire region looks like a vast ocean of stone, where countless sharp rock towers rise densely like an alien forest of pillars. Many of these rock columns stand as tall as a building, with more than 10 floors, balancing on soft volcanic ground like giant stone chimneys rising from the earth. The soft volcanic rock allowed ancient people to carve deep rooms, corridors, and storage spaces inside the stone in order to survive in this harsh environment. Geologists from NASA have studied Cappadocia as a natural model to understand the surface of Mars, because the rock valleys here resemble the landscape of another world. Walking through these enormous stone labyrinths, many explorers say people suddenly realize how small humans are compared with the slow but unstoppable power of nature. What happens when the ocean hollows out a massive cliff at Beniguil Cave in Portugal and creates a giant dome that opens directly to the sky above? Inside the cave, the limestone dome rises nearly 100 feet high, spreading wide like a natural cathedral where sunlight falls onto a small sandy beach in the center. A circular opening in the ceiling, about 30 feet wide, acts like a giant skylight, allowing beams of sunlight to pour down onto the sand like a spotlight in the middle of the ocean. When the tide rises strongly, seawater rushes into the cave, and the small beach turns into a swirling pool where swimmers must carefully judge every move to stay safe. Geologists travel to Beniguil Cave to study how the ocean has slowly carved the limestone for millions of years, shaping a vast dome that looks like a giant structure. Standing on the enclosed sandy floor inside the cave, people often feel as if they have stepped onto another world where rock, ocean, and light create a landscape that feels like another planet. Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany is one of the most famous castles in the world and is often seen as a real-life symbol of fairy tale stories. When people look at this place, they often wonder why a king chose to build Neuschwanstein Castle on a steep cliff about 600 feet high, where every piece of material had to be pulled up dangerous mountain slopes. When construction began in 1869, engineers and workers had to move heavy stone up steep mountain paths where every step carried the risk of slipping off the edge. From a distance, the bright white castle rises above the dark mountain forests and looks like a fairy tale fortress floating above a vast ocean of rock. Many architecture explorers later came here to study how people in the 19th century dared to build such a structure in such a dangerous landscape. The dramatic mix of steep cliffs, wild mountain forests, and dreamlike architecture makes Neuschwanstein Castle look more like a landscape from another planet than a normal castle on Earth. Would you dare to step into Antelope Canyon in the United States, where a narrow desert rock crack feels like a giant fracture that makes the outside world disappear? The sandstone walls rise about 120 feet, almost as tall as a 10-story building, standing around you like a corridor on another planet. Over thousands of years, sudden desert floods carved the sandstone into smooth, twisting waves, forming a maze of glowing rock deep inside the canyon. In 1997, a sudden flash flood rushed through the canyon and killed 11 visitors, reminding the world that beauty and danger can exist in the same place. When sunlight passes through the narrow opening and meets floating desert sand, the entire canyon lights up like a giant beam of light rising from the desert floor. Because of this, Antelope Canyon is not only a geological wonder, but also a place where people clearly see how fragile humans are against the power of nature. On the western edge of Ireland, Slieve Head appears like the final rim of the continent, where towering cliffs drop suddenly into the vast Atlantic Ocean. Massive cliffs here rise as high as a building, about 60 floors tall, and fall straight into the ocean with no beach or shoreline in between. Why do many explorers immediately feel the clear boundary between land and the endless ocean when they step onto the edge of Slee Head? Because the continent suddenly ends in a giant stone wall that opens to the enormous Atlantic ahead. Part of the reason is that the coastal rock layers at Slee Head formed about 350 million years ago, when this land once lay beneath a vast ancient ocean. Geologists have sometimes needed safety ropes while studying the cliff edges because the steep rock surfaces are slippery and the empty drop below leads straight into the ocean. The combination of towering cliffs and an endless ocean horizon makes Slee Head widely known as one of the most extreme edges of Earth. In the Rocky Mountains of Ethiopia, Abuna Yamata Gu stands on a tall stone pillar where an ancient church was established in a steep cliff and has existed for more than 1,500 years. The church was carved directly into sandstone during the 5th century, showing an early religious tradition of constructing sacred spaces within solid rock formations. Researchers report that several wall paintings inside the church have survived for more than 1,000 years, preserved by the dry environment and isolated location. Abuna Yamata Gu sits on a cliff roughly 600 feet above the surrounding ground, which means access is possible only by climbing directly along the rock surface. The steep rock terrain protected the church for centuries and allowed the ancient religious structure to remain largely intact through many historical changes. At the entrance carved into the cliff face, visitors see a centuries-old church quietly positioned among massive stone columns rising across the Ethiopian mountains. In Pakistan, Hunza Valley lies within the Karakoram Range, where peaks rising above 23,000 feet surround a narrow valley shaped by glaciers and terraced fields. In history, trade caravans crossed this region along ancient routes, traveling for weeks through rock, ice, and steep terrain to connect distant parts of Asia. Green terraced farms press against grey cliffs and white glacier masses, forming a layered landscape where human life survives within a limited strip of workable land. At more than 7,800 feet above sea level, residents continue farming by guiding meltwater through handmade channels stretching for miles. Peaks exceeding 23,000 feet, nearly twice the height of Mount Fuji, create an extreme vertical contrast between valley floor and towering rock walls. In a valley enclosed by mountains thousands of feet high and glaciers thousands of years old, how does a community remain stable? The answer lies in precise control of glacier meltwater and a social system carefully adapted to high-altitude conditions. On the northwestern plateau of China, Kohan Salt Lake covers more than 2,200 square miles, a vast salt lake where a white solid surface has completely replaced the idea of open water. In many areas, the salt crust is several feet thick, strong enough to support railways and heavy trucks, turning the dried lakebed into a real industrial foundation. Potassium reserves here account for a large share of domestic supply, so mineral extraction continues across a landscape with almost no tall trees or flowing water. Large salt plates crack into polygon shapes, stretching for miles, creating a surface that looks engineered, even though it formed through long natural evaporation. You walk across a solid white crust, spreading nearly as wide as a major city, and sense complete emptiness, realizing that beneath this surface lie minerals that support national agriculture. Kohan stands as proof that evaporation lasting millions of years can reshape an entire region, concentrate minerals, and transform an inland body of water into a hard salt plain with almost no life. Anadyr is the capital of Chukotka in the far east of Russia, a city near the Arctic Circle with about 15,000 residents living across open tundra stretching for hundreds of miles. There is no direct highway connecting it to the rest of the country, so access depends mainly on airplanes and ships, and supplies must travel thousands of miles. Its population equals that of a small town, Yet the city administers a territory covering hundreds of thousands of square miles, showing responsibility far beyond its size. The ground is shaped by permafrost, forcing buildings to stand on special foundations so structures remain stable when soil conditions shift over natural cycles. Residents explain that essential goods can take weeks to arrive, which is why living costs rank among the highest in Russia. The survival of Anadaya within remote tundra proves that modern urban life can endure at a harsh geographic edge, making it a symbol of long-term human adaptation in far eastern Russia. In northern India, Spiti Valley is a high-altitude desert valley at about 12,500 feet, where people live within the dry terrain of the Himalayas. The collision between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates lifted an ancient seabed more than 10,000 feet high, leaving marine fossils embedded in dry grey rock layers. Reaching this valley requires traveling hundreds of miles along narrow mountain roads, and months of isolation each year force residents to store food for survival. Population density here is far lower than in major Indian cities, creating a close community where many families remain rooted across several generations. Walking across barren rock slopes and along a river cutting through the valley, you sense a hard surface that feels like an unfinished plateau of another planet. How did a place once beneath the ocean become a desert nearly 13,000 feet high? Millions of years of tectonic movement pushed marine sediment upward, forming a raw landscape that preserves rare geological history. In northern Pakistan, Hussaini Hanging Bridge is a suspension bridge about 300 feet long, crossing a glacial river within dry, rocky mountain terrain. The wooden planks are spaced several inches apart, wide enough to clearly see the cloudy blue water moving below, turning each step into a real mental challenge. Before modern infrastructure existed, local residents used this bridge to carry goods, and children crossed it daily to attend school. The structure relies only on steel cables and simple wooden boards, creating a sharp contrast between fragile construction and the vast mountain landscape around it. Walking across the lightly shaking surface, you realize survival depends completely on balance and focus above a long, open drop. Why does a wooden bridge, shorter than the height of the Statue of Liberty, challenge thousands each year? The wide plank gaps, strong river below, and remote setting combine to make it a true test of courage. Have you ever heard about Wadi Rum in southern Jordan, where massive sandstone mountains rise from red desert sands and attract explorers from around the world? Moving across wide desert valleys, travelers see towering sandstone formations standing along the horizon like enormous stone walls. The unusual shapes of this landscape, formed as wind and water, gradually carved sandstone layers into cliffs and valleys across millions of years. Some sandstone mountains in Wadi Rum rise above 5,000 feet, which is close to 3 times the height of the Eiffel Tower. Geological research indicates that many rock layers here developed from ancient sediments deposited about 500 million years ago. Large natural rock arches appear across the desert, where erosion slowly hollowed massive sandstone blocks over long periods of time. In the northern mountains of Pakistan, Fairy Meadows is an alpine meadow at about 10,800 feet, located directly below a peak, rising above 26,500 feet among the tallest mountains on Earth. A height difference of more than 13,000 feet between the soft grassland and the massive rock wall behind it creates a strong landscape contrast, as if 2 distinct natural zones exist side by side. To reach this place, you must cross a narrow mountain road and then hike for several miles. And this demanding journey helps the area remain clearly untouched. Many international climbing teams have used this meadow as a staging area before approaching difficult routes, turning it into a meeting point between local life and global expedition culture. Small wooden cabins managed by local residents stand scattered among pine forests, highlighting how modest human presence appears beside a mountain towering over 26,000 feet. Fairy Meadows represents a fragile balance between high-altitude grassland and an enormous rock mass, where people recognize their limits before geological structures shaped over millions of years. In the desert of Turkmenistan stands Darvaza Gas Crater, a giant pit where natural gas has burned continuously for decades after escaping from underground layers. The crater measures about 200 feet wide and nearly 100 feet deep, roughly matching the height of a multi-story building placed vertically underground. Darvaza formed in 1971 when the ground collapsed during a natural gas survey, exposing a large methane pocket trapped beneath sediment layers. Scientists ignited the leaking gas to prevent environmental spread, yet methane kept rising from underground, and the fire has continued for more than 50 years. Hundreds of small vents release methane across the crater floor, which allows multiple flames to burn at the same time across the entire pit surface. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in the United States is a volcanic landscape where people can observe the surface of Earth still forming through lava flows and young basalt rock fields. Walking across black lava plains, stretching toward the horizon, many visitors begin wondering what created this rough ground and why it resembles an ocean of stone that suddenly hardened. Geological studies show the park covers about 500 square miles, forming a vast volcanic terrain where many lava layers accumulated through different eruption periods. Entering lava tunnels reaching about 1,000 feet, People can imagine molten rock once rushing through the passage before the outer surface cooled into a natural stone tube. Moving deeper across hardened lava plains, visitors gradually realize the ground beneath their feet is not ancient terrain, but land formed relatively recently in geological history. Standing among endless basalt fields, people often feel as if they are walking across a landscape where the earth quietly continues reshaping itself beneath a surface that appears still. In the northwest of Iceland, Drangajökull is a glacier covering about 60 square miles, equal to more than 20,000 soccer fields, forming a massive ice dome near sea level with very limited road access. When you walk across its wide, white ice plateau among deep crevasses and ice hundreds of feet thick, the sense of isolation and emptiness makes the experience feel far removed from familiar landscapes. In the past, coastal communities in this region lived cut off for months because of the difficult terrain around the glacier, and their survival stories show how demanding this environment has always been. The glacier edge stands only about 100 feet above sea level, a rare feature in Iceland, yet the ice body still maintains thickness reaching several hundred feet. Unlike many other Icelandic glaciers, the bedrock beneath Drangajökull is less affected by volcanic activity, so its changes have remained relatively steady over recent decades. The surface is marked by crevasses that can reach dozens of feet deep as the ice slowly moves down slope, each fracture revealing pressure built up over thousands of years. El Caminito del Rey in Spain follows steep vertical cliffs where a narrow walkway is fixed directly onto the rock wall above a deep canyon. Several sections of the path hang about 300 feet above the canyon floor, creating the feeling of walking along a suspended corridor beside the cliffs. The full walking route stretches roughly 5 miles, and many segments use steel frames and wooden boards anchored firmly into the rock face. The towering cliffs consist mainly of limestone formed from ancient sediment layers that were slowly carved into a deep gorge over millions of years. The pathway was first constructed in the early 20th century, so workers could move between engineering facilities across the rugged terrain. Before the major reconstruction completed in 2015, several parts of the original walkway had collapsed, and visitors once relied on safety cables attached to the cliff. On high cliffs in northern India, Danka Monastery appears as an ancient cluster of buildings attached directly to a steep rock slope at about 12,700 feet above sea level, making its construction location highly unusual. From the monastery position, observers can look down across a wide valley stretching between dry mountain ranges, where steep terrain creates clear differences in elevation across several layers of land. Historical research shows the monastery was built around 1,000 years ago, which makes Danka one of the oldest Tibetan Buddhist religious centers in the Himalayan region. The monastery structure includes many small rooms built from rammed earth and wood, arranged along the mountain slope to adapt to steep cliffs and limited construction space. Over many centuries, the thick earth walls have largely kept their original shape because traditional building techniques were well suited to the dry, cold climate of high mountain environments. Seen from a distance, the entire monastery looks like an ancient earth structure fixed directly into a tall cliff, forming a distinctive image of a cliff monastery within the rocky landscape of the Himalaya. Perched on steep rocky slopes of the Dolomites in Italy, Bivacco Buffa di Perero appears as a small red mountain shelter positioned within a vast alpine landscape. The structure stands at an elevation of about 9,000 feet, which means reaching it usually requires experienced climbers traveling across difficult mountain routes. From surrounding mountain slopes, this compact metal shelter can be seen attached directly to rock among steep cliffs and deep valleys extending for miles. Inside the refuge, the available area measures about 100 square feet, providing space for roughly 6 to 8 people during long climbing journeys. On the Faroe Islands in the North Atlantic, Gassadalur stands on a coastal plateau about 300 feet above sea level, facing an ocean that stretches for thousands of miles. For centuries, the village remained almost completely isolated because steep mountains blocked land access, forcing residents to cross the mountains on foot or travel by boat. In 2004, a tunnel about 5,000 feet long was completed through the mountain, creating the first direct road connection to the settlement. The entire landscape sits on basalt rock formed about 55 million years ago during massive volcanic eruptions that created the Faroe Islands. From the edge of the plateau, coastal cliffs, more than 1,000 feet high, drop directly into the Atlantic Ocean, forming one of the steepest coastlines in the region. A waterfall from the plateau falls about 100 feet straight into the open sea, a rare geographic scene because most waterfalls on Earth end on land. Hidden beneath the limestone mountains on Palawan Island in the Philippines, Puerto Princesa Subterranean River National Park reveals a dark underground river world that makes many explorers feel as if they have entered another planet.
Music licensing reimagined.
An underground river about 5 miles long flows through a massive limestone mountain before reaching the sea, creating a dark water corridor where natural light almost completely disappears. Scientific exploration teams must travel by small boats through narrow rock passages where the enormous cave ceiling echoes with the sound of flowing water and deep darkness surrounds everything. Some giant cave chambers have ceilings nearly as tall as a 10-story building, where huge stalactites hang like natural stone columns formed slowly over hundreds of thousands of years. As research teams move deeper inside, they must carefully control light and sound because the fragile cave ecosystem can change from even a single small disturbance. What makes Puerto Princesa Subterranean River National Park often described as another world beneath the earth. Perhaps it is because a river nearly 5 miles long flows through a gigantic limestone mountain in total darkness, where natural light almost disappears and every sound of water echoes like inside a vast stone cathedral. Erta Ale in Ethiopia is a place where a massive lava lake moves constantly like an open ocean of fire on a distant alien planet. This volcano rises a little over 2,000 feet high, which is similar to a skyscraper about 200 floors tall, standing alone in a vast field of black basalt rock. Inside the crater, the lava lake spreads more than 300 feet across, swirling endlessly like a giant basketball court filled with glowing liquid metal. Exploration teams must cross sharp fields of frozen lava that cut like broken glass, where every step slowly drains water supplies and tests human endurance. Geologists have risked their lives approaching the crater edge to watch magma moving in front of them, a rare moment many describe as seeing the beating heart of Earth. The constant open lava lake and endless black basalt landscape make Erta Ale look less like a normal place on Earth and more like a volcanic world from another planet. What kind of place is Mustang Kingdom in Nepal, deep inside the Himalayas, where dry cliffs contain thousands of ancient caves that still leave archaeologists searching for answers? As travelers move across the vast dry valleys of Mustang, they see cliffs rising more than 300 feet, where countless caves appear like honeycombs carved into the mountain walls. Why does a region surrounded by high mountains resemble a desert, and how did persistent dry winds over centuries carve the rock layers into deep canyons and unusual stone pillars? Mustang stands at an average elevation of about 12,000 feet, and many visitors immediately notice the thinner air when entering this high and arid landscape. Who once lived inside caves carved into steep rock faces, and by what methods did ancient people reach chambers located hundreds of feet above the valley floor? Across the massive dry cliffs, there are more than 10,000 ancient caves arranged in tiers, forming something that resembles a silent stone city suspended in the Himalayan sky. Can you imagine the moment when the ground at Paracuti in Mexico suddenly split open and a new volcano was born right in front of people's eyes? In only 1 year, Paracutin grew to about 1,400 feet tall, rising like a building with more than 100 floors above a vast black lava landscape. From above, the entire region looks like a young planet just forming, where broken volcanic rocks spread across the land in every direction. Scientists moved dangerously close to the erupting crater to record each stage of its birth, turning Paracutin into one of the rare natural laboratories for studying volcanoes. The walls of a church still rise out of the frozen lava desert, creating a strange scene that many travelers compare to ruins left behind on Mars. Lava eventually covered nearly 10 square miles of land, creating a huge maze of black rock where every step reminds visitors how small humans are beside the power of Earth. Banff National Park covers more than 2,500 square miles, where sharp rocky mountains and deep glacial valleys create one of the wildest mountain landscapes in North America. For many decades, explorers and scientists have crossed vast glacial valleys to study the harsh, high mountain ecosystem found in this remote wilderness. Ancient glaciers, once thicker than 3,000 feet, crushed rock and carved enormous valleys, leaving behind glowing turquoise lakes that appear almost unreal. Steep cliffs and giant boulders dragged by glaciers have turned many areas of Banff into remote wilderness that is extremely difficult for people to reach. In this harsh landscape, humans can only observe and slowly learn how life survives under the powerful natural forces that shape this region for millions of years. Banff was recognized as part of the Canadian Rocky Mountain Park's World Heritage Site by UNESCO in the year 1984. Dettifoss is one of the most overwhelming natural landscapes in Iceland and is widely known as the most powerful waterfall in Europe. On average, about 18,000 cubic feet of water crash down every second into a dark, rocky canyon, with force like thousands of trucks falling into the earth at once. When scientists move close to the edge to measure erosion, they must shout to hear each other because the roaring water sounds like a giant jet engine. The waterfall drops about 145 feet, about as tall as a building of more than 10 floors, where massive water crashes onto dark basalt rock. Thick mist rises from the bottom of the canyon and fills the air, and many exploration teams say they become completely soaked after only a few minutes. Surrounded by black volcanic rock and swirling grey water, Dettifoss becomes a natural laboratory where humans witness the raw power of Earth. At Arches National Park in the state of Utah in the United States, visitors enter a vast red rock desert where enormous stone arches make the landscape look like a distant alien planet. The entire park covers about 76,000 acres and contains more than 2,000 natural stone arches, forming a massive maze of red rock that feels like a giant stone city in the desert. These giant arches rise from ancient sandstone, and many structures stand as tall as a building of more than 20 floors, making people below look extremely small. Geologists once risked climbing smooth rock cliffs here to study how water slowly enters cracks in the stone and eventually creates natural bridges suspended in the air. Beneath the desert surface, ancient salt layers push the rock above upward, shaping a landscape that looks like thousands of huge stone gateways connected across the land. Combination of ancient red rock, a harsh, dry landscape, and enormous natural arches makes Arches National Park resemble the surface of another world beyond Earth. Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania rises from the African plains like a massive stone fortress, making people wonder what place on Earth could tower above open grassland like this. The mountain stands almost as tall as two Boeing 747 airplanes stacked on top of each other, creating a giant wall of rock rising from the savanna. The entire mountain is a huge dormant volcano where dark volcanic rock and ancient ice exist together, forming a landscape that looks like another planet. The crater at the summit is nearly 2 miles wide, large enough to hold a major airport, turning the top of Kilimanjaro into a high rocky desert above the clouds. In some emergencies, rescue teams must help climbers suffering from brain swelling caused by high altitude, one of the most dangerous risks on the mountain. Kilimanjaro is one of the rare places on Earth where glaciers, a giant volcano, and tropical landscapes exist together in the same dramatic environment. In Iceland, Vatnajökull is the largest glacier in the country, covering about 3,100 square miles and nearly 8% of national territory. In several areas, the ice exceeds 1,300 feet in thickness, almost as tall as the Empire State Building, while active volcano systems remain hidden beneath it. In history, sudden glacial floods caused by eruptions under the ice swept away roads and bridges, forcing nearby communities to relocate and rebuild. The surface is not smooth, but torn by crevasses stretching hundreds of feet, forming a rugged structure that resembles an unstable planetary crust. Across the vast white expanse, each step requires ropes, metal spikes, and strict discipline, because a small mistake can lead into hidden cracks beneath hardened snow. In 1996, a volcanic eruption beneath the glacier triggered a massive glacial flood that destroyed infrastructure and required years of reconstruction afterward. Mono Lake is one of the oldest and strangest lakes in North America, where thick alkaline water and strange tufa stone towers create a landscape that looks like another planet. What created the unusual stone towers rising from the water of Mono Lake like a fossil city? And how has the harsh alkaline environment supported unique life forms for about 760,000 years? The lake water is extremely salty and alkaline, making it impossible for most animals to survive. Yet huge numbers of tiny microorganisms and brine shrimp still live there. Hundreds of tufa stone towers rise more than 30 feet above the water, forming a maze of limestone structures that many scientists compare to landscapes on other planets. When research teams arrive at Mono Lake, they realize the place acts like a giant natural laboratory for studying the limits of life on Earth. The combination of powerful alkaline water, heavy mineral content, and ancient tufa formations makes Mono Lake one of the harshest and most surreal landscapes on the planet. There is a place on Earth where you must hike for hours across sharp limestone terrain to reach milky turquoise water enclosed by pale grey rock walls. Are you ready? That place is Lake Serapis in northern Italy. The lake's milky turquoise color does not come from artificial minerals, but from fine rock powder crushed by ancient glaciers, and these tiny particles scatter light to create its unusual shade. The lake covers about 10 acres and sits nearly 6,200 feet above sea level. And although small in size, it is completely surrounded by steep, vertical rock walls. During the First World War, the mountain area around the lake served as an important defensive line, and remaining military traces show this quiet place once faced harsh conflict. The trail stretches nearly 7 miles, with narrow sections where hikers must move close to rock faces, and reaching the cloudy blue water becomes a true reward after crossing difficult terrain. Local legend says the lake's color is the tears of a fairy, and this story shows how earlier communities explained a rare natural phenomenon before science provided clear answers. In Italy stands Mount Vesuvius, one of the most studied volcanoes on Earth, where powerful eruptions have produced major geological changes through recorded history. The volcano rises about 4,200 feet above sea level and formed as a stratovolcano built from repeated layers of lava and ash. Its summit crater measures roughly 2,000 feet across and forms a large basin that reveals evidence of many eruption cycles through time. In year 79, an eruption produced an ash column rising more than 20 miles into the atmosphere and became one of the best documented volcanic events of the ancient world. Geophysical surveys indicate that the main magma chamber beneath Mount Vesuvius lies approximately 5 to 6 miles below the surface of Earth. The eruption style known as Plinian eruption was named after descriptions written about this volcano, making the site important in the development of volcanology research. What happens in the Himalayan foothills across India and Nepal when lowland slowly rises into rolling green hills before the massive Himalaya mountains begin to dominate the horizon? Moving across this landscape, you can see hill after hill arranged like giant waves of earth, giving the feeling of gradually entering a realm of higher mountains. Scientists explain that this entire region formed from the collision between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate during a geological process lasting about 17 million years. Elevation in the foothills can rise from roughly 500 feet to more than 6,000 feet within a relatively short distance across the terrain. Along the slopes stretch dense forests and wide valleys where large rivers descending from the Himalaya deposit thick layers of fertile sediment over millions of years. Standing among these repeating hills often feels like stepping through a natural gateway that leads directly into the immense mountain world of the Himalaya. Jeju Island of South Korea lies in the sea south of the Korean peninsula, covering about 700 square miles and standing more than 50 miles from the mainland, creating clear geographic separation. Its entire ground is made of basalt, formed by eruptions about 2 million years ago, and the porous rock absorbs rainwater quickly, so almost no large surface rivers develop. Within less than 800 square miles, more than 300 extinct volcanic cones are spread across the island, giving it one of the highest concentrations of volcanic landforms in East Asia. In 1948, a violent political conflict caused the deaths of tens of thousands of residents, and this tragedy deeply shaped the social memory and structure of the island community. The tradition of female free divers has lasted over 400 years, reaching depths of about 60 feet without tanks, and UNESCO recognized this cultural practice in 2016. When you enter a lava tunnel stretching more than 7 miles with ceilings near 30 feet high, the solid black rock and enclosed space clearly reveal the massive force of ancient volcanic creation. In the southwest of New Zealand lies Milford Sound, a fjord carved by ancient glaciers, where cliffs rising over 3,300 feet enclose a long, narrow stretch of water. The depth reaches about 1,300 feet, close to the height of the Empire State Building, placed beneath the surface, showing how powerful ice once cut deep into solid rock. Average rainfall exceeds 240 inches each year, creating a thin layer of fresh water above the sea, and giving the deeper water its dark tone. In the early 20th century, small exploration teams were trapped for days by landslides and steep terrain, proving this area was once extremely difficult to access. No large cities or massive structures interrupt the rock walls and dense forest, allowing the landscape to remain mostly untouched for generations. A narrow inlet carved by ancient glaciers about 1,300 feet deep, with cliffs rising over 3,300 feet, has remained stable for thousands of years. So what geological force shaped this structure and continues to keep the entire system balanced today? According to scientists, long periods of glacier erosion cutting into hard bedrock together with a stable geological foundation created steep yet durable formations that have endured over time. On the west coast of Ireland, Diamond Hill rises about 1,450 feet above sea level, standing over dark peat ground, an ancient rock in a harsh, open, natural setting. The landscape has no tall forest cover and is mostly exposed stone and low grass, with dark brown and pale grey tones that give the area an old and rugged appearance. In the 19th century, local residents cut peat here for daily fuel, and the remaining cuts in the ground still show how this hill once supported basic survival needs. The peat layer formed over more than 5,000 years at a rate of about 1 millimeter each year, so the surface that looks simple is extremely fragile under human pressure. To protect the soft ground from erosion, a trail nearly 4 miles long was built with wooden boards, reducing damage caused by hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. The combination of rock that is hundreds of millions of years old, thick peat soil, and wide open land without major structures makes Diamond Hill a clear example of wild Irish nature. You will feel stunned when standing before Douro Valley in Portugal, where steep rocky mountains and endless vineyard terraces rise like giant stairways across the landscape. The geology of this valley is dominated by ancient shale rock, more than 500 million years old, cracked layers that allow roots to push deep into the ground to find water. The shale slopes here are so steep that generations of people had to build stone terraces by hand in order to hold soil and grow vineyards on the mountains. Many vineyards sit almost 1,000 feet above the river, a height similar to a skyscraper taller than 80 floors, hanging over the rocky hillside. For centuries, surveyors and vineyard workers climbed dangerous slopes and narrow terraces to turn this harsh stone landscape into an extraordinary agricultural scene. Biologists have recorded that many plants here adapted to survive in rocky soil with very little nutrients and extremely strong sunlight. In San Juan Parangaricutiro in Mexico, once a normal farming town, the land was almost completely buried by thick volcanic lava. In 1943, a small crack opened in the ground and the Paricutin volcano began erupting ash and lava, forcing thousands of residents to abandon their homes and farmland. Why do scientists consider San Juan Parangaricutiro a rare natural laboratory on Earth? Because they were able to observe and document the entire life cycle of a volcano from its birth until it finally stopped erupting. In just 1 year, the new volcano grew taller than 1,300 feet, while lava flows nearly 100 feet thick buried the entire old town. Geyser Lake in the Altai Republic of Russia is a geothermal lake about 100 feet wide, smaller than half a standard football field, yet its surface constantly forms moving blue spirals. Geological surveys in the mid-20th century recorded stable rotating patterns here, confirming a real hydrothermal system rather than a simple visual illusion. Beneath the clear water, pressurized gas and groundwater push fine mud upward in short cycles, creating changing circular rings without any tall, erupting geysers. There are no buildings surrounding the lake, only thin forest and natural dirt paths, which help preserve its raw condition over many decades. Local residents call it the Eye of the Earth, and stories tell how a thrown stone once disturbed the center, but the circle quickly closed again. In the Danube Delta region of Romania lies Letia Forest, a woodland covering about 12,000 acres where ancient oaks, sand dunes, and wild horses exist within one rare ecosystem. Sand dunes rising up to 30 feet appear between dense trees, creating a semi-dry environment inside a forest setting that is unusual for Europe. The wild horses are believed to descend from domestic animals left behind generations ago, and they now move freely while fully adapted to sandy ground and thick vegetation. Many oak trees are several hundred years old, with large trunks wrapped in long vines, showing strong adaptation to unstable sandy soil. There are no paved roads or major structures cutting through the forest, only natural sandy paths that help preserve its untouched character. Across an area equal to nearly 7,000 football fields, what allows tree roots to anchor deeply and keep an entire forest stable on loose sand for centuries without collapse. According to ecologists, deep layered root systems combined with long-term sand stability maintain balance throughout the ecosystem. A river stretching nearly 370 miles suddenly forms a wall of muddy white water rushing inland. How many places on Earth erase the line between river and sea so quickly? In eastern China, Qiantang River reveals this rare sight. When the tidal peak reaches its strongest point, the wave can rise over 30 feet, about the height of a 3-story building, and move faster than 18 miles per hour, reversing the current within minutes. This happens because the wide funnel-shaped estuary compresses incoming seawater, forcing it into a long continuous wave that transforms a calm surface into a powerful moving mass. For more than 1,000 years of written records, riverside communities have gathered to observe the tidal bore. Yet accidents occurred when spectators stood too close to the water. Fishing families have long adjusted their schedules according to the lunar cycle, showing how daily life here remains closely tied to the rhythm of rising and falling tides. Qiantang River stands as a symbol of tidal power and the complex meeting of sea and land, where geography can amplify ocean energy beyond ordinary expectations. In China, Badain-Jaran Desert stretches like a vast sea of sand, where dunes rising over 1,600 feet stand in an open landscape without urban traces. Some dunes exceed 1,600 feet in height, nearly as tall as the Empire State Building, turning each climb into a serious physical challenge in harsh surroundings. The desert covers about 19,000 square miles, an area comparable to a medium-sized country, forming a continuous expanse of sand where people can easily lose direction. What is striking is that more than 100 lakes exist among the dunes, sustained by deep underground water systems that contradict the common image of a desert as only dry land. Ancient trade caravans once crossed this region, and knowledge of navigating by dunes and lakes was passed down through generations living along the desert edge. A desert containing towering sand mountains and hundreds of inland lakes raises a question. What geological process created such complexity? The answer lies in thousands of years of sand accumulation combined with deep groundwater, forming a rare structure of dryness and hidden water. Oymyakon is a small settlement in northeastern Russia where people maintain stable daily life in what is considered one of the harshest inhabited environments on Earth. In 1933, the area recorded about -90 degrees Fahrenheit, far colder than most industrial freezers at around -4 degrees Fahrenheit, a level that can make metal brittle and stop vehicles from working. The entire region stands on permanent frozen ground, so water pipes are placed above the surface, and houses are built with special insulation systems to support everyday living. Rivers and lakes freeze thick enough for motor vehicles to travel across them, turning the white landscape into a solid natural surface similar to poured concrete. Although the population is only a few hundred people, schools remain open under extreme conditions, and residents rely on a meat and fish-rich diet for long-term adaptation. Oymyakon is widely recognized as one of the coldest permanently inhabited places ever measured, becoming a global symbol of how far human survival can extend. Have you ever heard of the Qinghai-Tibet Railway in China, where trains cross a vast plateau and open a journey through landscapes that feel almost separated from the familiar world? Inside the train, passengers look through wide windows and see grassland stretching toward the horizon, creating the feeling of gliding across an endless ocean of land. Much of the journey takes place above about 13,000 feet, where thinner air requires passenger cars equipped with oxygen systems similar to aircraft cabins. Many sections run across frozen ground, supported by more than 600 bridges, where concrete pillars lift the track above the surface to keep the frozen soil stable. As the train moves across hundreds of miles of plateau, long views of snow, covered mountains and open grassland appear one after another along the route. And as the train glides across the frozen plateau, you slowly realize you are traveling through one of the harshest environments on Earth by rail. Who would imagine that at Kilauea black sand beaches in the United States, a coastline is not built from river sand, but created directly when volcanic lava meets the ocean? Walking across the dark shoreline, you notice the sand grains feel heavier and rougher because they are actually fragments of basalt created when lava shattered in seawater. Geological studies show that some black sand beaches can appear after a single major eruption when fresh lava cools quickly and breaks into millions of rock fragments. How do these grains form? When lava around 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit pours into the ocean and instantly fractures as it cools in seawater. Moving along the coast, you can observe stacked layers of hardened lava rock, where each layer records a moment when molten rock once reached the sea. As lava repeatedly meets the ocean, new ground slowly builds outward, which means the volcanic shoreline here can change shape again after future eruptions.